Those who know the Democrats and Republicans are both corrupt. The people who organize, the people that take. Those who know the Democrats and Republicans are both corrupt. The people who organize, the people that take action. The demonstrators, the boycotters, the protesters, the marchers, the strikers. We the real freedom fighters.
That's right, yeah, tell them, let's go, come on. See, we the real freedom fighters. Like William Still, a freedom writer. They say just leave all our problems up to God. Make sure his name is praised. That didn't work for the Holocaust or Africans enslaved. It's up to us to fight for the cause to be free. I'm the type to fight, the drug laws are obscene. Most people in prison get that path for being poor. The system traps the poor, we fight back in this class war. I'm for freedom like CHE, UEP, you and me find salutes. Even Martin Luther King said it was time for revolution. Our values in the lead, stay in mansions. They don't care about people sleeping in the streets. They only care about themselves, they want. Where I reside, they plots got us buying food genetically modified. If I kill, it's homicide, but it bothers me. The government takes thousands of lives and people's property, and they call that foreign policy. We fight for freedom till we reach inequality. Come on. We the real freedom fighters. 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 Wherever you stand, fam, they want to take your land. They privatize the water, rise and profit off the dam. Iraq to Palestine, profit is the plan. They keep power from the people in their ruling class hands. They keep it concentrated, most minds ain't elevated. To see it's like 9 multinationals created a system where food, water, and land has a price. One night they'll charge you just to breathe the air in your life. This is the price of not fighting the elite. We getting beat, water, food, land, street. They tell us they own it, then they tell us to go and vote. But taking action in the street and not voting's my hope. On the whole, we never vote. We'll get to take a poll on the force they use to take resources they stole. And the hip-hop industry's not run by multinationals. Why you think you never hear no lyrics as rational? We the real freedom fighters. 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 In the crime of 9/11, 3,000 people died. Every day from hunger, 20,000 lose their lives. This is a crime that could be rectified by half the cost of waging a war. That's crazy. You can't have peace if you never feed the poor. But the elite raises with the value of greed. To be out for yourself and not people in need. They own the networks and program the mess. That materialism's the definition of success. It's the system television tells lies to your vision. They say nothing's free because we in capitalism. Right. Schools teach geometry, but not how a few rich families staying rich destroys the world's economy. They say rap just reflects what we face. And if you're drowning, you want a mirror to change the situation. If you make an observation, then you have an obligation. We the real freedom fighters. 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 And what if people took their obsession with weddings, invented that energy for making poverty end? Be against immigrants coming in from new lands, but love an immigrant from Krypton, Superman. If you rob a bank, they call that theft. If you rob a whole country, they call that the IMF. Basically, the schools are a disgrace. Face the fact is that they ran by the states. We the real freedom fighters. 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 Babylon needs to fall.
All my people who make conscious choices in their daily lives. Choices that affect the planet, sustainability, justice, and the possibilities of a better world. We the real freedom fighters.
The disproportionate amount of social misery, poor communities, disproportionately black and brown and red, one size doesn't fit all. Come to the black community, get yourself together, pull yourself up by your own bootstrap, personal responsibility. Oh, you didn't say that when the investment bankers were in trouble, did you? They didn't have to pull themselves up by their own bootstrap. They got $787 billion. Can you imagine giving $787 billion to poor people? It only takes $50 billion to wipe out poverty in major portions of the country, you see. Priority. And that doesn't downplay individual initiative. People still need to get their acts together. But it's just not a matter of an individual initiative. You can have all the individual initiative in the world, but if you're living in a hood where bullets are flying, where families are collapsing, where jobs are disappearing, then it's going to be 1 out of 10,000 who do it, the Michael Jordans. It's going to be the Oprah Winfreys, you know, the highly determined, genius-like figures who will get over. But they have many cousins who deserve a fair break, a fair deal. The family affair begins with the family, spills over into a larger community, but my love doesn't stop there. It spills over to indigenous peoples and Jews, Palestinians, Chinese, Japanese, Guatemalans, Ethiopians, and even white brothers and sisters in Appalachia trying to deal with the night side of the American empire.
Okay, I'm back. And I think I may end up pissing some people off. I gotta tell you a little bit about me. Some of it you know, some of it you don't. Back in the mid-50s, my father went to Atlanta to work with the Ryder system. He set up Ryder truck rental. And he was, Atlanta at the time had apartheid. You had brown water fountains, you had white water fountains. Brown bathroom doors, white bathroom doors. Signs on restaurants saying whites only or no niggers. They had blacks had to ride on the back of the bus, and if a white person came on, there weren't any seats in the white part of it, then the black had to get up and let the white person sit down. One thing that pissed me off about that was that I liked sitting in the back of the bus, and I wasn't allowed to. And I got to know a lot of blacks down there. And when I left Atlanta, I was thinking, white people are crazy. Because of the way they treated the blacks. Moved back to St. Louis. I lived in St. Louis before Atlanta. And when I got back to St. Louis, the schools were integrated. High school I went to was 1/3 black. Still couldn't go into the black neighborhoods, and the blacks couldn't come into my neighborhood. But we went to school together, we got along. In fact, the senior prom, the king and queen were black. Beautiful couple, too. And that gal, she was the cutest little thing. Anyway, I seem to be attracted more to the blacks than to the whites. Probably because of what I saw in Atlanta. But I couldn't go in their neighborhood, and they couldn't come to mine. Anyway, when I came to Detroit, I lived in the suburbs. I ended up working for a CPA firm. When I got married to my first wife, I didn't say I do, I said I do. I just didn't believe I was getting married to her. And it was a bad marriage. So anyway, I ended up being a drunk. I had a great job. I was with a CPA firm, doing great. Income was going up. I was offered a partnership, but I turned it down and went out on my own. And that's when the drinking really got bad. Anyway, I ended up, after 5 years of drunkenness, I ended up meeting a black woman. Fell in love, left a wife, lost every white friend I had. Even the ones that didn't like my wife. A lot of them didn't like my wife. Anyway, I ended up in the inner city. Now, my new girlfriend, who ended up being my wife, supported me for 6 months. she wouldn't marry me until I was on my feet again. I found out one thing. First thing I found out, first party I went to, white folks don't know how to have fun. I used to go to parties with rich folks. And my brother-in-law was a millionaire. And back then, a millionaire was something. Now, not so much. But the parties were boring. All people cared about was what you did for a living. Sometimes they even came right out and asked you how much money you made. It was ridiculous. Black folks, they don't care how much money you make. They don't care what your job is. I was better accepted by the blacks than I was by the whites. Especially now, because like the title sort of tells you, I may be white, but I'm also black. And I'm accepted by the blacks as a brother. Now, one thing I've learned, though, is that I learned about prejudice. I learned about how the wife and I had to check our food when we went to a restaurant in the white areas. Because every once in a while we'd find something strange in our food. One time we found some glass in it. And every once in a while we'd find a cockroach. But, so, then we had problems getting served in restaurants. We'd be sitting there and people that came in after we did are getting their food and we haven't even been waited on. After about 5 years it got a little bit better. But when I split up with the wife, I was still seeing black women. I go in a suburb and I get pulled over by the cops for nothing. Just because I was with a black woman. Even in Detroit, when I was with a bunch of black guys, narco would pull us over. Got to the point where one cop told me, he said, you know, one white guy with a bunch of black guys is thought of as a drug dealer. That's why you're getting pulled over so much. So I ended up having to go in different cars. Anyway, I am going to be winging it, by the way. So I'm just going to say what comes in my mind. One reason why I'm doing this one is because of Jordan Davis. And all the other black kids that have been murdered because of stand your ground. We have stand your ground here. And it seems like the bigots think that that's their right to kill black folks. And to me, it's lynching. This last show I had the Angry Indian on doing the show. It was his show. And it was almost 3 hours long. And it referred to Jordan Davis's killing as a lynching. And that's what it is. Lynchings are back. Now, you may have heard a lot about the new Jim Crow. about how blacks are going to prison for things that white folks do they don't go to prison for. But it's getting worse now, especially down south. And in Michigan it's getting worse because our governor is one of those who doesn't like black folks. Detroit's in receivership. The governor appointed a guy who is black, a rich black guy. He's a lawyer. Made a lot of money off of this, going bankrupt, getting his, making sure that the banks get their money and the people with pensions don't get their pensions. Now, a lot of people say, well, they're a union, they don't deserve their pension. What you don't realize is they don't get Social Security. That's what their pension is for. This governments don't pay into Social Security. They pay into the pension plan. And usually it's not as much as, a lot of times it's not as much as Social Security if you make good money. So what I'm going to do, though, right now, I'm going to play a thing I heard from Thom Hartman. And it's called Time for White Americans to Wake Up. And so I'm going to play it now.
I saw the most amazing thing on YouTube this morning. And rather than telling you the story of it, I asked Sean if she could track down the guy who did it, and he's with us. Jason Roberts, he's the host of Simple Misfits. Their YouTube channel is youtube.com/Simple Misfits, and it's a really amazing piece. Jason, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So tell us what you did, what you saw, what provoked you, and what you accomplished.
So what actually sparked this initial idea was I actually locked my keys in my car, and I had to call AAA. It happens to everybody once in a while. And when AAA arrived, he was trying to break into my car to get my keys, and he just happened to be an African-American guy. And what I started to notice as I looked around is that people started eyeing him in a negative way.
So the locksmith was black, and people were looking at him like, what's this guy doing?
He was obviously a professional. He had the AAA jacket on.
Right.
He was a professional, but somebody actually came up to me at one point and asked, like, is he with you?
Right.
Which really shocked me. So I figured I would reenact this whole process and see, if I would get the same result. And I was shocked at the difference of the reactions that I got when I went out and did it versus when my friend Clinton went out and did it. And I saw in the video,
your friend, you're white, your friend Clinton is black, and on the video, this is an amazing video, you were breaking into your car with a coat hanger on a public street as people were walking by for, 30 minutes?
Yeah, a little over half an hour.
Yeah, with the car alarm going off, wah, 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 and all these people, nobody gave you a second look.
No one said anything to me. No one tried to stop me. Cops were there at one point. They didn't say a word.
A police car literally drove by and stopped for a light next to you as you were breaking into your car and then continued going when the light changed.
Didn't even notice me.
Yeah. So then what happened when your friend who was African American broke into your car?
So we set up the camera. This family passed by. This Hispanic family passed by. I noticed that they stopped. They started staring into, or they started looking at Quentin and what he was doing, and then they noticed, oh wait, he's trying to break into the car. 2 minutes later, the cops show up. I couldn't catch the footage of the family calling. I saw them with their phone out, but they kept going in and out of the store, trying to double check on what's going on. And sure enough, 2 minutes later, the cops were there with, I think it was 5 squad cars.
So you the white guy, break into your own car for 30 minutes. Nobody says anything. Your friend, African-American guy, breaks into your car. Within 2 minutes, there's 5 police. And they didn't just, come by. They put him up against the wall.
Yeah, they also put me up against the wall as well. They took it to a whole nother level. I didn't think that it was necessary, one, to have 5 patrol cars, 10 cops there. And I believe there's a helicopter. I heard a helicopter above me, but I wasn't sure if it was for me or not.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't think that it would have to be taken to the level of being handcuffed and background checked, even though I proved to the cops that was, in fact, my car. And I
and this was your friend, and you asked him to open the door for you.
Exactly.
And at that point, what were they thinking of, charging you with something? I mean,
no. Afterwards, they let us go with no charges.
Were they nice to you at that point, or I mean, did we?
I mean, they weren't happy about the prank. They weren't necessarily nice, but they understood that at the end of the day, it wasn't a serious matter. It was just a prank.
Were any of the cops black?
Press charges. Not that I recall.
Yeah.
I remember Asian and white.
Yeah. Okay. So, what's the carry-home message that you actually? I think I see one police officer might be African American. I'm looking at the clip right now. Oh, that's the guy handcuffed. Oh, that's your friend who's handcuffed. Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at a freeze frame here. So what's the carry home for you, Jason? What's the lesson that you learned from this and that you're trying to share with people? By putting this up on YouTube, you can see it over youtube.com/simplemisfits.
I would just say, keep an eye out. I mean, I didn't make this video intending it to get this big. It was just more of a social experiment for my own fun. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just
in the wake of
stereotypes are still very much alive, even though we don't think that it is. We don't believe that it's. We believe like everyone is treated equally. But I mean, I just don't.
I think your timing on this thing. I mean, this is just a couple days after a white guy gets off for murdering a black kid. And it's and basically his defense was he was black and so I was afraid of him.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I heard about that.
And so here what we have is, in your case, white guys can break into cars, black guys can't, and even when they own the car, and so this is really a commentary on the fact that racism, or even I'm not even sure you call it racism, racial awareness, fear of race, whatever, fear of other, is alive and well in America. Was this a largely white neighborhood, or was it a mixed neighborhood, or was it that you were doing this? Most of the people walking by seem to me to be white.
This was in Hollywood.
In Hollywood, okay.
In basically central LA.
Yeah, in central LA. So there's a large black population, but Hollywood is mostly a white community. So your friend probably.
I think it's pretty multicultural, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing story. Jason Roberts, he's the host of Simple Misfits. Their YouTube channel is youtube.com/Simple Misfits. If you haven't seen this video, it's really, really worth checking out. Jason, thanks for the great idea that you followed through on and did so well. And thanks for being on our program today.
All right, thanks, Thom. Thanks for having me.
Good talking.
Okay. I've been, like I mentioned before, pulled over by narco a few times, and one time, one of the guys with me wanted me to stop at his uncle's house so he could get some money from the uncle. And so we pull up in front of the uncle's house, and he goes in. And all of a sudden, narco's there. And they decide to search the car. And I didn't realize it, but the guy on the passenger side had a joint in the ashtray. The cop noticed the joint just as I did. I'm thinking, oh, shit. The cop said, noticed that I had that oh shit look on my face, so he said, oh, don't worry about it. We're looking for crack. And he said that it was a crack house we were parked in front of. And I said, well, crack people, when they buy crack, they don't park in front of the crack house. They park down the street and walk up. That's how you know it's a crack house, because people are parking down the street and walking up. If they parked in front and just went in, you wouldn't probably notice that it was a crack house. And anyway, he took the joint and lit it up and smoked it. And I'm thinking, I like that cop. But he told me, he says, don't ride with your buddies because you get pulled over by narco a lot. And I did. One time we were riding through this one town. Speed limit was 25. We were going 30. And go around the corner, and all of a sudden the cop pulls us over. And he's sitting in his car. He's not getting out of the car. And I'm thinking, what's up here? Why isn't he getting out of his car? And all of a sudden, 4 other cop cars come up with their sirens going and surround us. Then the cop gets out of his car and comes up, and I was talking to him, and he figured that it was safe, so he told all but one of the cars that they could go, but one car that stayed, the cops had their guns trained on us. And so anyway, I ended up getting a ticket. And normally if you're going 5 over, they don't bother you. Sometimes not even for 10 over if it's a low speed limit. But I was white driving with blacks. And that's why we got pulled over. And so after the cop left, and I noticed a guy that we had picked up, I never met the guy before that day, he had a nervous look on his face. And I said, what's the matter? He said, I just bought a bag of weed. And he had a bag of weed with him. And luckily the cops didn't search the car. I'm surprised they didn't. In fact, he was with us when we got pulled over by narco one time, and he told me, he said, I'm never riding with you again. But most of the places I even go to now, there are very few white people. Some places I'll be the only white person there. I have never had a problem. Now, one place I used to go to, whites weren't too well accepted. It was a very rough bar. But I knew the bouncer. And I told him, I said, you know, most of the places I go, I'm the only white guy. I never have a problem. I'm accepted as one of the people. But coming here, it seemed to me I should have some trouble. And he said, well, I tell everybody that you're a hitman. And I say, whenever you see the gray-haired old white man in here, he's a hitman. Don't mess with him. He just soon kill you. Just look at you. So they were afraid of me. I wondered why I'd go in there and I'd pay for my drinks in the bar. No, that's okay. That's out in the house. And so I told them I'll at least pay for every other one. And it was a topless bar, and the dancers would be sitting on my lap and never asked for a tip, even though I gave them a tip. But that's when I learned, when I'm in the hood, that I have to have a rep, even though it's wrong. I have to be a good con artist, and I can't have any fear. Now, the thing you got to realize is that blacks have been held down. Things were getting better, but now they're getting worse again. Whenever the economy goes down the tubes, blacks are the first ones that lose their jobs. And you may not believe me, and I don't much give a shit if you do or not. I just know that that's the way it works. Detroit is dying. The reason it's dying is because of NAFTA. And if the TPP goes through, it will be 6 feet under. Our governor stole money from us. And what happened, it was money that the state owed us for revenue sharing, and they cut down what they paid us. And they put their czar in here. And that's why I call Detroit Michigan's Gaza Strip. We're occupied by the state of Michigan. And give you an example. The assistant czar got pissed off at the people, so he turned off all the city lights. It was a dark night anyway. I don't think there was a moon that night. And there were no lights, no traffic lights. All because somebody told him to go fuck himself. So he decided to punish us all. I had a business a while back. It was after I married my second wife. And I had my office was in an area that was full of a lot of people who did not like blacks. All my friends were black. I had 2 white guys working for me during tax season. And they moved. And I ended up hiring 2 black guys. And my wife was working for me. And the last guy I hired, he says, "Lee, you can't hire me." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, you're the only white person here now." And I said, "Well, if they can't take a joke, fuck them." Well, they couldn't take a joke. After the first tax season was great. Second one, business was cut in half. Third one, when it came, I couldn't afford the rent. I couldn't afford the payments on buying out my partners. So I ended up moving into the city. A client of mine and gave me rent free. And soon after I gave everything to the wife. We split up. And another couple years I was homeless. I had a job with Howard Johnson's Hotel. Give you examples. They had 2, I forget, the guys that take the bags. Busboy, no. Anyway, they had bow ties. Every once in a while, a white one would forget his bow tie and never said anything. But one time, the black guy forgot his, and they sent him home. When they would have parties for the high school. The high schools would rent rooms and have parties for graduation. White kids, they left alone. The black kids, security was all over him. The white kids were rowdier than the black kids. And my girlfriend got robbed. She came by and I gave her some money. I gave her a kiss. And the guy that was my supervisor, he was black, but he didn't like to mix a couple idea. He told the boss. Next day I got a phone call from the guy that was a manager. I think he owned the place too. It was Howard Johnson's, but it was a franchise. And he said, Lee, I don't want you to think it's because of your lifestyle. Now, when someone says that, that's the reason. But I'm going to have to let you go. I said, why? He said, well, you just aren't picking up the job fast enough. I was telling my supervisor how to do things because I knew the job better than he did. And I was thinking about suing, but they ended up going out of business anyway. So anyway, the main thing I want you to understand is that blacks have a reason to be upset with whites. And surprisingly, even though you hear a lot about blacks being prejudiced against whites, a lot of them that you would think would be prejudiced aren't. And the ones that are prejudiced against whites have pretty good reason. The reason is that whites hold them down. Now, there are some cases, though, where some black people would rather have work for a white person than a black person. Because sometimes a black person will get uppity and they'll treat their whites bad, their workers badly. But I don't find that a lot anymore. Well, that's because most of the people I know are unemployed. Hell, I think all of them are. And it's not because they aren't looking, because there aren't any jobs out there. And the jobs that are out there are minimum wage. And when it comes to restaurants, it's below minimum wage because they figure that you get tips. So they figure about what your tips are, and they pay, I think it's about $2.30 an hour, maybe $2.50. When I was a bartender, that's why luckily I got pretty good tips when I was a bartender. But the thing that people don't realize is that blacks don't get as good tips as whites do a lot. So anyway, what I want to do is play something else. This is from the Young Turks, called Warning and Saying Racist Audio. And, well, you'll find out what it's about. Okay.
Now, there's a guy that HLN keeps bringing on to defend people like George Zimmerman and Dunn, who just did the shooting in the Loud Music case, right? And he's often saying about how blacks are aggressive. In the Michael Dunn case, he said, look, even if these blacks didn't have a weapon, you got to remember that if you're a young black man, you're more prone to violence. So what? What? That's unbelievable. So like, they had it coming because they were young black men. It was a fair assumption of Dunn to think that, well, if they're black and they're young, I should shoot them before they do anything. What an outrageous guy. Why would you bring that guy back half a dozen times, right? Well, in the Zimmerman case, at least they had some rationale. They said that he was a fellow neighborhood watch volunteer and he was a friend of Zimmerman. And of course, in the Zimmerman case, he would constantly refer to Trayvon Martin as a hoodlum. Unsurprising given who he is, which I'm about to explain to you. And he kept saying in the Dunn case that Davis, the kid who got shot, was clearly the provoker, which is ridiculous. He didn't have a weapon, etc. I guess his music provoked his own murder. That's his outrageous claim. So who is this Taffy character who's defending Dunn and Zimmerman? Well, I've said in the past on the show that if you defend these guys, now Zimmerman's a little different, actually, to be specific. If you defend Dunn, I said that you were a horrible individual. Well, it turns out I was right. He is a horrible individual. He is a guy who has said unbelievably racist things before. In fact, on air, Frank Taffy once said, you know, white racism is not America's biggest problem. I feel the biggest problem is education. There's a distinct gap between the graduation rate of African Americans versus whites or Latinos in the country, and this was simply a matter of loud music, a man asking them to turn it down, and they did not oblige, and then it escalated. So, now this is not among the atrocious quotes, but look at that quote, where he says, no, it's not Dunn's fault for shooting at him 10 times. It's their fault for being uneducated. How do you know they're uneducated? Well, they're black. He said, I assume they're uneducated, and they had it coming because their uneducated folks played the music too loud, thereby leaving the white man no option but to murder them. Okay. If you're not convinced yet, I got more for you. Now, in the past, Frank Taffy, in his Stand Our Ground podcast, which is basically a white supremacist podcast, had said, I always say, this is about Nicole Brown and how all white women dating black guys should get the same fate. I always say, you lie down with dogs, you're going to get fleas, especially if they're black dogs. Okay. Now, we're not done with Frank Taffy yet. So Mother Jones ran this article about all the outrageous things that he has said, and Nancy Grace had him back on, and now finally did a good job of challenging him on the outrageous things that he said. Get a load of his lies, and then we'll show you actual audio from Frank Taffy and show you what he in fact did say. Watch.
Frank Taffy, you have adamantly defended George Zimmerman, and you have steadfastly defended Michael Dunn, and I'm wondering why you were hanging in there so staunchly. And it has recently, very recently, come to my attention about some very disturbing comments on your Twitter feed. Out to the control room, what was the comment we wanted to ask Frank about?
The only time a black life is validated is when a white person kills them. End quote.
No,
right.
It's not true. And I have a pending lawsuit against Mother Jones, by the way. I'm glad you brought that up.
There's also your alleged response to them. What's the response from the control room, please?
Quote, that minority group, they don't do anything productive for this country except for the NBA. And if it wasn't for the NBA, Joe, like I always say, our country would have the world's tallest garbage men. Thank God for the NBA. End quote.
That's not my Twitter account. I've already defended myself on that.
Because, Taffy, that is so
That's horrible.
And
that's horrible. That's not my Twitter account.
So
that's sometime from years back. Someone hacked into my account. So thank you for letting me get it out there.
Did they hack into your account, or that's not your Twitter account? Huh, that's interesting. Now, the reality is, those things were actually not tweets originally. They were audio from his podcast. And we have that audio. Oops. Here's Frank Taffy in his own words.
We're sick and tired of this bullshit, this country where one minority group dominates and dictates what the majority is supposed to be doing. I don't think that's the way it works. And that minority group, they don't do anything productive for this country.
Well, look, I'm not going to say that they're controlling
us. Except for the NBA. And if it wasn't for the NBA, Joe, like I always say, our country would have the world's tallest garbage men. Okay? Thank God for the NBA.
Did someone hack into your mouth and make you say those things? So, gee, I wonder who defends Michael Dunn. What did I tell you? It's exactly guys like this that defend Michael Dunn. And by the way, HLN, you don't need balance in every case. You don't need someone to say Charles Manson is a good guy if you're going to have somebody on to say Charles Manson is a bad guy. You don't need somebody to come on and make Michael Dunn's or George Zimmerman's case. Now, look, there's sometimes a case to be made. The Zimmerman case was very hard to prove in a lot of ways inside the courtroom. I get that. I get the controversy around that. I didn't agree with the decision, but I understand it. Michael Dunn is an open and shut case. He was firing at the kids as they were trying to drive away. What part of that is stand your ground or self-defense? Right? You don't need a Michael Dunn guy for nonsense balance. And who are you going to get to defend him? There's only guys like this who always say, it's not about race. It's not about race. No. It's just that, he was concerned about protecting himself and his fiancée. All right, it's not about race. Here's more from Taffy.
Well, it goes back to the premise that, I once said that the only time that a black life is validated is when a white person kills them. Okay? Other than that, we're part of the groove, man. It's okay to off 12 of us, and nobody cares, but I guarantee you that if I stormed into the local KFC with the AR-15 and offed about 12 of them, I don't think I'd make it out the front door.
No. It's never about race. Of course not. If you're still not convinced, well, boy, you're thick-headed. Okay, but I'll give you one more anyway. They had a debate on this brilliant podcast about whether Oprah was the N-word. The person arguing that she is Frank Taffy. Listen.
Hey, welcome. This is Frank Taffy to episode 8, I believe, of Standing Our Ground. I'm Frank Taffy, and I'm here with my co-host. I'm doing good. I'm actually in the parking lot of the KFC in beautiful downtown Sanford. I figured it'd be very apropos.
I don't know. Would Oprah Winfrey qualify as a nigger to you?
To me, she wouldn't.
I think she is.
Oh, Frank, you go first then.
Yeah, she's a nigger because she keeps spewing out all that bullshit. She goes over to Switzerland and she says that the lady didn't want to show her a handbag because she thought, that she couldn't afford it. And she keeps just doing what she's doing. She keeps stirring the pot. She keeps trying to promote her boy Obama. Obama could do no wrong. It's birds of a feather. They flock together and stick together. And to me, she's a nigger. Oprah Winfrey's a nigger.
Oh, not at all.
She's a nigger.
Not at all.
It's funny about Oprah. It's white women that made her rich, isn't it? It wasn't the black people.
Yeah.
Go think about that shit.
Yeah. Perhaps HLN and all other TV shows that have this despicable clown on should think about that shit. All right. So, by the way, one more thing about Frank Taffy. You know how he calls black people criminals all the time? You heard it for yourself there. They're always shooting people up, etc. They're thugs. Frank Taffy has been arrested or faced criminal charges at least a dozen times, including drunk driving, stalking, domestic violence, child abuse. And the networks make no mention of his criminal record or white separatist ties before that last appearance with Nancy Grace. Who's the thug?
Okay. Excuse me. I got a few other things to say. I lived in one of the roughest areas of Detroit. Probably one of the roughest areas in the country. And the cops were afraid to go in the neighborhood. And you know something? I felt safer. I really did. Anyway, I have seen a lot. My ex-wife, my second wife, when she talked, she sounded like she was white. And her mother used to complain about her sounding white sometimes. yes, her mother was prejudiced against whites, but she loved me. She just said I wasn't white. And, but she called for a job in the suburbs of Detroit. And they talked to her on, come on out, you got the job for sure. And she gets out there and they see the color of her skin and they say, we just hired somebody. Now this was only about 20 minutes after she called. So you know damn well that they were lying. And she complained to the equal opportunity people. And they put a wire on her, and she did it for a few other places. And they ended up getting busted. But the thing is that I not only see the prejudice against blacks, but I get prejudice against me because I'm with blacks. I get prejudice against me because live in neighborhoods that are mostly black. Right now I live in a senior citizens building. There's probably a couple hundred people living here. And it's a pretty nice building. And it's probably 90% black. And I enjoy it here. And we've got on one side a Catholic church, and on the other side we got probably the whoop-de-dooest hotel in the city of Detroit. All the entertainers go to this hotel when they come into the city. And in fact, our czar lives in the hotel. And the city's probably paying for his room. But the hotel tried to buy the building I'm in. And the owners of the building make good money on the building, so they told the hotel no. And then there's these people own another building across the park, and it's in bankruptcy now. What it is, though, is that there's some rich folks that want the building. So they're working things out so they get the building cheap. And all the people that live there, I think about 100 of them, are getting kicked out. They were given a year to get out. There's still a few of them there, and there isn't much time left. But they're fighting to keep their place. I had a friend that lived in a apartment building, and it was a slumlord building. The guy lived in the suburbs that owned it, and he didn't do a damn thing to fix the place up. It had a rat problem, bed bugs, and the heat was off, and so the city ended up closing it down. Everybody that lived there was homeless. The city didn't care. But there was a couple organizations that helped people find a place to live. But the thing is, though, that if you lived in an inner city, now I've been in the inner city all of the past 30 years. I've been in the inner city at least half that time. Well, I've been in the inner city all that time, but I've been in the rough areas about half that time. And if you saw what I saw, I think you would change your mind about blacks. I have seen kids that were really smart, smarter than most college graduates that I've seen, and they were high school dropouts. 80% of the kids in Detroit don't graduate from high school. Main reason is our schools aren't worth a shit. We got a couple high schools that are really good, but you gotta be a B student to get into them. And it's not just black problem. It's a poverty problem too. Some of these kids, their father's gone, they gotta go out and help their mama get money to survive on. That's why they get into selling drugs. Now, you look at the prisons. I used to have a website called The Injustice System. When I was on BTR, I had a radio show called The Injustice System. And every once in a while I play some stuff that I had then. I used to be in contact with a lot of prisoners around the country. Federal and state prisons. And a hell of a lot of innocent people in prison, especially on death row. Let me give you an example of a guy on death row. This guy was busted for 7 robbery murders, gas station robberies. The guy killed the people in the gas station. And the guy was white that did it. I saw a picture of the guy. It was a drawing done by a witness. And he didn't look a thing like the guy that they arrested for it. The guy they arrested for it, out of 7 charges, he was convicted on 4. 3 he wasn't convicted on because it came out that the killer was white. So they made sure it didn't come out in the other ones. He's on death row in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is very good at framing people and putting them on death row. But luckily they don't execute too often. And they caught the guy. The guy confessed to all the murders, but they only charged him with the 3 that the other guy was acquitted for. And now he's in prison. Of course, he didn't get death sentence since he's white. There are white people on death row, true. But the thing is that cops know that he killed all 7. And yet the black guy's still on death row for the 4 that he was convicted of. Doesn't make sense to me. There are a lot of people on death row that shouldn't be there. That's one reason why I'm against the death penalty. Another reason I feel that it's murder. And I don't think people have a right to take another life. And there's a picture that I have for this show, and I'm going to use it probably pretty often. It's a slave picture, and it was painted by a guy on death row. He sent me a bunch of pictures. I made copies of them. And he was executed a few years back. And my health was bad, and I didn't find out until about 4 years afterwards. And I know he was innocent. He was in Texas. Heard a guy in Texas say, if a white person kills somebody, a black man's going to go on death row. That's why it happens a lot. And in most of these cases, witnesses are the people who actually did the crime. That's with white and blacks. There's a white guy on death row, and his brother committed the murder, but framed him for it. There's a guy in Mississippi. He got life in prison for murder. He was seeing a white girl, and her brother didn't like it, so her brother killed someone and pinned the murder on him. Now, again, this happens to some white people, but mostly with blacks. In Louisiana, black man, he's been in prison for, I think, 38 years now for a rape that he not only didn't commit, but it didn't happen. Now, the gals that said that they were raped said it was a white guy. Name was Elvis something. The guy who was convicted, of course, was black. And on the witness stand, they said that he told them their name. The witness story didn't anywhere near agree with what the cops, their statement to the cops were. But they wanted to get him. What happened was he was arrested for the rapes. And one cop was beating on him. And the other cop shot him in the back. He went to the hospital and he came out still alive and went to trial. All the witnesses said that he did it. They didn't have a medical report. The DNA wasn't tested, but that was before DNA was really taken care of. And now, of course, they lost the DNA, so he's still in prison. Another thing, one of the gals that was raped was still a virgin. And the other gal had sex with someone else before. And according to the doctor, neither of these girls were raped. But that doesn't matter. Anyway, I just want you to think. People are humans. There's no such thing as a black race, a white race, a yellow race, red race. We're all the same race. We all started from one man, but there were two women involved. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with Genesis and Adam and Eve. Actually, to me, it sort of makes me think that evolution is probably right. Now, we don't know if the ones who started were actually human. Well, it was the first humans, but they were evolved. They weren't human before. There was a in between the apes and the humans. There was another group. They weren't considered human yet, but they weren't considered apes. And they were mostly in Europe. But then the ones that started all ended up mixing with them too. Anyway, it all started in Africa. It all started with the black race. So we all have some black in us. We all have some white in us. We all have a little bit of everything in us. Now, the reason for the different colors is where the people were. Europe, because of the climate, the people were white-skinned. Africa, because of the climate, they were dark-skinned. In Asia, because of the climate, they were yellow-skinned. Some places they were red-skinned. Native Americans came from Asia, from Mongolia. If you look at Mongolians, they look a lot like Native Americans. And what happened was, thousands of years ago, the Bering Strait wasn't there, and Alaska was connected to Russia. And they walked to America from Mongolia. At one time, there were over 12 million Native Americans. Now there's about 250. Who do you think killed them off? Why are they gone? Genocide. And this happens all over. But I'm not going to sit here and blame all you white folks for what many people did in the past. I'm not prejudiced against white folks. I'm prejudiced against assholes, really. There's assholes in all races. And I don't much care for bigotry. Because bigotry is ignorance. Racism is ignorancism. I did a show on that a while back. Anyway, I'm going to call it quits now. I've got some stuff I got to do before I go to bed, and it's getting late. It's about 11:30, a little after that. And I got to go pee. So what I'm going to do is play a little something. It's called A Different World. And it's by The Truth. Oh, by the way, I began with The Truth on Freedom Fighters with Cornell West. It's a Different World featuring Angela Davis. And so what I want to do is play that, and then I'll say goodbye after that.
It's a very different story. It's a story about people just like you. It is not a story about heroic individualism. does not mean squandering all of the country's resources on war and prisons at the expense of healthcare and education. Security means affordable housing. Security means free education. Security means free healthcare. And security means compassion for one's community.
Okay, I want you all to have a good day, a good week, a good month, and a good year. And I want you to have a beautiful life. Thank you for being you. TGYA, thank God you're alive, and I want you all to love you all. And so I am out of here.